"I will be the father," the Duke declared, saving poor peasant beaten for birthing twin girls. The church bell tolls. Dust swirls in the village square. A poor mother is dragged before the crowd, her newborn daughters clutched tight, while her husband's hand comes down in rage, and then hooves thunder. A noble carriage halts. A powerful voice cuts through the silence. "Enough. If no man will claim these innocents, then I will be the father." Gasps ripple through the crowd. A duke risking his honor for a beaten peasant woman and her twin girls. But what drives him to such a shocking vow? And what secrets bind her fate to the manor itself? As whispers spread and enemies close in, one question burns brighter than all: will love and courage be enough to defeat scandal, cruelty, and the law itself? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The church bells of St. Mary's rang clear and crisp across the village square on that cold spring morning. Their solemn peals drew both peasants and gentry from their homes, all dressed in their Sunday best despite the biting wind. Women pulled woolen shawls tight around their shoulders as they hurried across the cobblestones, while gentlemen adjusted their cravats and helped their ladies step carefully around puddles left by the previous night's rain. The peaceful scene shattered as angry shouts echoed against the stone buildings. Lara stumbled into view, her face as white as the church's weathered walls. Her husband's iron grip on her arm forced her forward, making her weak legs tremble beneath her. Only days had passed since she had given birth to twin daughters, and she clearly belonged in bed, not being dragged through the village square. Useless woman. Her husband bellowed, his face red with rage and the effects of too much ale. "Two girls. What good are daughters to me? I needed sons." He shook her roughly, causing her to cry out in pain. The gathering crowd shifted uneasily. Some women whispered behind their hands, their eyes full of pity for the new mother. Others turned away with scornful expressions. Having heard rumors of Lara's common birth and her arranged marriage to the merchant's son. "Please," Lara whispered, her voice barely audible above the continuing toll of the bells. "The babies need feeding. They'll sicken without me." Her plea earned her a sharp slap across the face. "Let them sicken. I disown them, and you." Her husband's hand rose again as the villagers gasped. The parish priest stood at the church steps, wringing his hands. His eyes darted between Lara and her enraged husband, but fear kept him rooted in place. Everyone knew of the husband's violent temper, how his fists spoke louder than words when crossed. The sudden clatter of carriage wheels on cobblestones drew all eyes to the grand conveyance entering the square. The golden crest of Wexford gleamed on its polished black door, and the matched pair of greys tossed their heads proudly as they came to a halt. The crowd fell silent as Duke Kevin of Wexford emerged. His tall figure, clothed in elegant dark blue, commanded immediate attention. Recently returned from London, the Duke's stern countenance spoke of grave authority as his sharp gaze took in the scene before him. "What manner of disturbance is this?" The Duke's voice cut through the tense air like a blade. His eyes narrowed as he observed Lara's trembling form and the red mark blooming on her cheek. My Lord Duke, Lara's husband, attempted a clumsy bow, his grip on his wife's arm never loosening. "This be none of your concern. A private family matter, dealing with my worthless wife. Release her." The Duke's command rang with quiet power. When the husband hesitated, Kevin stepped forward, his presence somehow filling the entire square. "I said, release her now." The husband's fingers slowly uncurled from Lara's arm, leaving angry red marks on her pale skin. She swayed, barely keeping her feet. Kevin's gaze swept the crowd, taking in the averted eyes of the priest, the mixed expressions of the villagers. His own face hardened as he considered the scene. A new mother, clearly unwell, being publicly abused while her newborns lay somewhere without her care. Enough. The Duke's voice echoed off the church walls, silencing even the last whispers. He drew himself up to his full height, authority ringing in every word. If no man here will claim these innocents, then I shall be their father. A shocked silence fell over the square. Even the church bells seemed to hold their breath. Villagers stared at one another, unable to believe what they had heard. The Duke of Wexford, one of the most powerful men in the county, offering to claim 2 unwanted infant girls as his own. The priest's mouth opened and closed without sound. Lara's husband stood frozen, his face draining of color as he realized the implications of a duke's interest in his affairs. And Lara, poor pale Lara, finally gave in to her weakness and began to crumple toward the cobblestones. The village square remained frozen in stunned silence after the Duke's declaration. Even the morning breeze seemed to hold its breath as Kevin turned to address his steward, Mr. Whitcomb, who had emerged from the carriage. "Have the nursemaid Betty accompany us," Kevin commanded. "We shall convey Mistress Lara and her infants to the manor immediately." His voice carried the quiet authority that brooked no argument. Lara stood trembling, one hand pressed against her side, where pain still lingered from the difficult birth. Her mind spun with uncertainty. Was this truly salvation, or merely trading? One form of bondage for another. She had heard tales of nobles' cruelty matching any common man's. Yet the Duke's eyes held something she had not expected. Compassion. "Your Grace," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I must fetch the babies first." "There with the midwife's daughter. Mr. Whitcomb will see to it," Kevin assured her, his tone gentling as he addressed her directly. Within moments, the steward returned with a young maidservant carrying 2 tightly swaddled bundles. The Duke himself assisted Lara into the carriage, his strong hands steady and proper as he helped her manage the steep steps. The nursemaid followed with the twins, settling them carefully in their mother's arms before taking her own seat. Kevin entered last, positioning himself on the opposite bench where he could observe them all. As the carriage began to move, the villagers bowed low, their faces a mix of shock and curiosity. Through the window, Lara caught glimpses of people hurrying away from the square, no doubt eager to spread word of the morning's extraordinary events. The Duke of Wexford, claiming peasant-born infants as his own. It would be the talk of every cottage and tavern before nightfall. Inside the carriage, the steady clip-clop of hooves filled the silence. Lara held her daughters close, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep, unaware of how their lives had just changed. She could feel the Duke's gaze upon them, studying them with an expression she couldn't quite read. "They are beautiful children," he said at last, his voice soft but carrying clearly in the confined space. "How old are they?" 5 days. Your Grace," Lara managed to answer, though her voice trembled. The events of the morning, combined with her weakened state, were taking their toll. The gentle swaying of the carriage made her head spin, and dark spots began to dance before her eyes. Kevin noticed her growing pallor with alarm. "Mistress Lara," he called, leaning forward with concern. But Lara could no longer respond. The last thing she heard was the Duke calling out sharply for the driver to make haste before darkness claimed her entirely. When the carriage arrived at the manor, Kevin took immediate command of the situation. "Whitcomb," he ordered, as servants rushed to assist them, "summon Dr. Morris at once. Have the blue guest chambers prepared, the ones nearest to my own suite. They're the warmest in the house." The steward's eyes widened slightly at this unprecedented arrangement, but he bowed and hurried to comply. Around them, servants gathered in doorways and corridors, whispering among themselves. Some looked scandalized at the sight of their Duke carrying an unconscious common woman in his arms, while others' faces showed sympathy for her obvious distress. "Betty," Kevin addressed the nursemaid as he strode through the manor's halls. "You will remain with Mistress Lara and the infants. See that they want for nothing." Hours passed in a blur of activity. When Lara finally opened her eyes, she found herself in a chamber more luxurious than any she had ever seen. Warm candlelight flickered against rich blue wallpaper, and she lay in a bed soft as clouds. Nearby, in a hastily arranged cradle, her twins slept peacefully. From beyond the heavy oak door, she heard the Duke's distinctive voice giving firm instructions. The wet nurse is to attend them only if absolutely necessary. The mother's health is our primary concern. Dr. Morris's orders are to be followed to the letter, and I want to be informed immediately of any change in her condition." Lara's eyes filled with tears as she realized that, for the first time in years, she felt truly safe. The grand dining hall of Wexford Manor glowed with the warm light of dozens of beeswax candles. Their flames reflected off polished silver and crystal, creating an almost magical atmosphere that made Lara's head spin with its grandeur. Still, weak from her ordeal, she leaned heavily on Betty's arm as the nursemaid helped her to the dining room. Duke Kevin rose from his seat at the head of the massive oak table when she entered. "Mistress Lara," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "I trust you are feeling somewhat recovered." "Yes, Your Grace," she murmured, eyes downcast. She could feel the stares of the servants lined along the walls, their disapproval almost palpable in the air. To everyone's surprise, Kev moved to pull out the chair at his right hand, a place of honor usually reserved for distinguished guests. "Please join me for supper." The butler's face twitched with barely concealed dismay, while a young serving maid nearly dropped her pitcher of wine. Lara herself froze, uncertain. "Your Grace, surely I should eat in the servants' hall," she began. "You are my guest," Kevin interrupted firmly, "and you will dine accordingly." Once seated, Lara found herself before an array of silver that made her hands tremble. Multiple forks and spoons gleamed before her, each clearly intended for specific purposes she couldn't begin to guess. The soup before her steamed in a delicate china bowl that probably cost more than her father had earned in a year. She took tiny sips, acutely aware of her coarse manners compared to Kevin's refined movements. The food, though surely excellent, tasted like ashes in her mouth as she struggled with the weight of her strange situation. "Tell me of your family," Kevin said quietly, after watching her pick at her food for several minutes. "Your parents? Are they still living?" "No, Your Grace," Lara replied softly. "Father passed when I was 12. Mother," her voice caught slightly, "Mother left us 2 winters ago. She taught me everything I know, how to keep a home, tend a garden, care for the sick. She was the kindest soul in our village." Kevin nodded. Thoughtfully, "She sounds like a remarkable woman. Did she approve of your marriage?" Lara's hands twisted in her lap. She was already gone when the match was made, Your Grace." Before Kevin could respond, a thin wail pierced the air quickly, followed by a second. The twins brought down in their basket to be near their mother, awakened hungry and discontented. The butler's face grew even more pinched. "Shall I have them removed, Your Grace?" To everyone's astonishment, Kevin was already rising from his seat. "No need, Hawthorne." He crossed to the basket and, with surprising gentleness, lifted one of the crying infants. "There now, little one," he murmured, cradling the baby with practiced ease. "What's all this fuss about?" The servants stood frozen, watching their master, the Duke of Wexford himself, soothing a common-born infant. The baby's cries gradually softened to whimpers, then ceased altogether as Kevin paced slowly around the table. Lara hurried to attend. To the other twin, her heart so full she could barely breathe. "Your Grace," she whispered, "I never imagined, I cannot thank you enough." "No thanks are needed," Kevin replied, still gently rocking the now quiet baby. "Every child deserves care and protection, regardless of their birth." Later that night, in her luxurious chamber, Lara knelt beside the cradle where her daughters slept peacefully. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, silvering their tiny faces. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, tears falling freely. "Thank you for bringing us to this place, to this man's protection. Please help me understand why he shows such kindness to us, who are nothing to him." But below stairs, in the servants' hall, whispers flew back and forth like darting sparrows. "Did you see him holding that baby? What can he be thinking, bringing them here? Or mark my words, there'll be scandal over this. The gentry won't stand for it." Shush, here comes Mrs. Pierce. The housekeeper's arrival silenced the gossip. But the glances exchanged between the servants spoke volumes. Something unprecedented was happening at Wexford Manor, and none could guess where it might lead. Dawn's first light crept through the manor's tall windows, painting golden streaks across Lara's chamber floor. The peaceful morning silence was broken by the hungry cries of her twins. Lara stirred from her unusually comfortable sleep, still unused to the softness of the feather mattress and fine linens. Outside her window, she could hear the manor coming to life. The clatter of pots from the kitchen below, the crunch of gravel as stable boys led horses out for morning exercise, and the quiet murmur of maids carrying firewood and fresh water through the corridors in the Duke's study. A different scene was unfolding. Kevin stood by the hearth, one hand resting on the carved mantelpiece as he faced his steward, Mr. Whitcomb, and his cousin, Lord Percival. The morning light had not yet reached this wood-paneled room, leaving their faces half-shadowed in the candlelight. "Cousin, you cannot be serious about this folly," Lord Percival declared, his aristocratic features twisted with concern. "Taking in a common woman and her bastard twins. The ton will be scandalized." "They are not bastards," Kevin replied evenly. "They are legitimate children, whatever their father's character might be." "Character?" Percival scoffed. "What of your character? Your reputation? Have you considered how this will affect your standing?" Among the nobility, Mr. Whitcomb cleared his throat nervously. "Your Grace, Lord Percival raises valid concerns." Word has already reached the bishopric. "The bishop's secretary has sent inquiries about your unusual declaration in the village square." Kevin turned to face them fully, his expression resolute. "Let them inquire. I will not abandon innocent children to abuse, nor their mother to brutality, simply to please society's delicate sensibilities. Think of the alliances you could secure through marriage," Percival pressed, pacing the carpet. "What noble family will want their daughter linked to a house that takes in common strays? You have responsibilities to your title, to your lineage." As they argued, Lara had ventured into the corridor, seeking hot water for the babies. She froze outside the study door, catching fragments of their heated discussion. Her heart sank as she realized the trouble she had brought upon her benefactor. Guilt weighed heavily in her chest as she hurried back to her chamber, fighting tears. Later that morning, the physician arrived to examine Lara. Dr. Morris was a portly man with kind eyes but old-fashioned methods. He clucked his tongue as he checked her pulse and complexion. "The patient shows significant weakness," he announced to Kevin, who had insisted on being present. "I recommend immediate bloodletting to restore the balance of humors, perhaps 3. Or for good-sized bowls should suffice." "No." Kevin's voice was firm. "There will be no bloodletting. She needs rest and nourishment to regain her strength, not further weakening." The doctor bristled. "Your Grace, with all due respect, I have treated many women after difficult births, and I have seen too many weaken and fade after such treatments." Kevin interrupted. "She will have rest, good food, and gentle exercise when she is ready. That is my final word on the matter." Lara lay still in her bed, overwhelmed by the Duke's continued kindness, even as anxiety gnawed at her heart. The physician's visit had left her tired, but her mind raced with worried thoughts. Through her chamber window, she could see the manor's carefully tended gardens. where gardeners worked among the spring flowers. The sight of such beauty only heightened her sense of not belonging. As the afternoon sun warmed her room, Lara came to a difficult decision. Her presence was causing trouble for the man who had saved her and her children. The whispers of servants, the disapproval of Lord Percival, the inquiries from the bishop, all because of her. Despite the ache it caused in her heart, she knew what she must do. Looking down at her sleeping twins, Lara made a silent resolution. If leaving the manor would protect Kevin's reputation and position, she would find the strength to do so, even if it meant facing an uncertain future. Even if it meant giving up the safety and kindness she had found here, she would not allow herself to be the cause of the Duke's downfall. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the nursery's mullioned windows, creating patterns on the floor like scattered gold coins. Lara sat in a rocking chair beside the cradle, softly humming a lullaby her mother had taught her years ago. The gentle melody filled the warm air as she watched her daughters drift between sleep and Walworth. The door opened without warning, and Lara startled at the sight of Duke Kevin entering the nursery. She moved to stand, but he gestured for her to remain seated. "Please, do not stop on my account," he said quietly. "The song is lovely." Lara's cheeks flushed. "Your Grace, I did not expect. That is, I hope the little ones were not disturbing your work." Kevin approached the cradle, peering down at the twins with undisguised curiosity. "May I?" he asked, reaching toward one of the babies. "Of course, Your Grace." Lara stood to help, guiding his arms into the proper position. "Mind her? Head. Just so. Just so." Kevin's movements were uncertain as he lifted the infant, his large hands, more accustomed to handling documents and riding reins, seemed almost comically oversized against the tiny bundle. The baby squirmed, and for a moment, panic flashed across his face, but then the child wrapped her tiny fingers around his index finger, and Kevin's expression transformed. A laugh escaped him, deep and genuine, unlike his usual reserved demeanor. Such a grip for one so small. Two chambermaids passing in the hall paused at the door, their eyes widening at the sight of their master cradling a common-born infant. They exchanged glances, their previously stern expressions softening as they watched him gently rock the child. "She favors you," Kevin observed, studying the baby's features. "Though I suppose at this age it is hard to tell." Lara nodded, adjusting the blanket around the other twin. "My mother always said babies look like themselves first, before growing into family resemblances." She paused, a distant look crossing her face. She would have loved to see her granddaughters. "Your mother," Kevin said carefully, "she served here at the manor, did she not?" "Your Grace." "In the kitchen gardens, many years ago." Lara's voice grew warm with memory. "She taught me everything about herbs and vegetables, which plants need morning sun, which flourish in shade. She always said the manor gardens were magical places where even the humblest seed could grow into something beautiful." Kevin listened intently, his eyes thoughtful. "Remember those gardens from my childhood. The kitchen gardens were my refuge when lessons grew too tedious. The gardeners would let me help plant seedlings, never telling my tutors where to find me." He smiled faintly. Perhaps our paths crossed then, though neither of us knew it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Everly, the housekeeper, entered carrying a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace," she said with a curtsy. "I thought the little ones might need these." She turned to Lara, her usually stern face showing a hint of warmth. "I've had some of the young ladies' old gowns altered. Nothing fancy, mind you, but good cloth still, and plenty warm." Lara's eyes filled with tears as Mrs. Everly unwrapped several small gowns, clearly made from cast-off noble children's clothing, but lovingly resewn to fit infants. The gesture meant more than mere clothing. It was a sign of acceptance from the household itself. "Thank you," Lara whispered, touching the soft fabric reverently. "This is too kind." "Nonsense," Mrs. Everly said briskly, though her eyes were gentle. "Can't have the little ones catching cold, can we? Not proper at all." Kevin carefully returned the baby to her cradle, his movements more confident now. "Excellent thinking, Mrs. Everly. See that Lara has whatever else the children might need." As evening approached, Kevin found himself pacing the long gallery outside the nursery, unable to tear himself away completely. The sound of infant laughter drifted through the door, bright, innocent sounds that seemed to chase away the shadows of memory that had haunted these halls since his wife's death. He caught himself smiling, remembering the tight grip of Tiny fingers and the trust in Lara's eyes as she showed him how to hold her daughter. Behind him, servants went about their evening duties, their whispers now touched with fondness rather than scandal as they watched their master's face light up at each baby's coo and giggle floating from the nursery. The morning sun warmed the dusty air of the old storeroom as Lara helped Mrs. Everly sort through years of accumulated treasures and trinkets. Wooden trunks lined the walls, their brass fittings dulled with age, while shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten items wrapped in yellowed linens. "Mind the dust, girl," Mrs. Everly cautioned, her voice softening as she watched Lara carefully. "Fold old tablecloths. You're still recovering your strength." Lara smiled, appreciating the housekeeper's growing concern for her well-being. "The work keeps my mind from worrying about the twins," she admitted, "though I know they're well tended in the nursery." As she lifted the lid of an ancient oak chest, something caught her eye. A leather-bound volume, its spine cracked but still sturdy. Brushing away the dust, she revealed a family Bible, its pages gilt-edged despite their age. "What have you found there?" Mrs. Everly asked, peering over her shoulder. Lara's hands trembled as she opened the Bible. There, in familiar handwriting that made her heart ache, were notes in her mother's careful script. This was my mother's," she whispered, tracing the faded ink. "She recorded her service here at the manor." The genealogy pages drew her attention, filled with names and dates stretching back centuries. As she read down the maternal line, her eyes widened. "Mrs. Everly, look, my mother's family. They were connected to the Knights of Old Wexford." "Let me see that," the housekeeper said, adjusting her spectacles. Her expression changed from skepticism to surprise. "Well, I never. We'd best show this to His Grace." They found Duke Kevin in his study, where morning light streamed through tall windows. He looked up from his correspondence, his stern features softening at their entrance. "Your Grace," Mrs. Everly announced, "we've made quite the discovery in the old storeroom." Lara presented the Bible with trembling hands. Kevin examined it carefully, his fingers tracing the genealogy with growing interest. "These records appear genuine," he said thoughtfully. "While this does not make you a noblewoman, Lara, it shows your line holds its own dignity." "I never dreamed," Lara began, then fell silent, overwhelmed. Kevin's eyes met hers with unexpected warmth. "Though, I must say, your own courage these past days has proven more noble than any bloodline could. The grace with which you've borne hardship, your devotion to your children, these speak more of true nobility than ancient names in a book." Color rose in Lara's cheeks at his words, and something unspoken passed between them in that moment. The sunlight seemed to glow more brightly, casting a golden halo around them both. Mrs. Everly cleared her throat discreetly. "I'll just see to the morning's duties then," she said, slipping from the room with a knowing look, but their peaceful moment was short-lived. Through the study's open window came the sound of approaching horses, visitors from neighboring estates, their voices carrying whispers of scandal. Servants hurried past the study door, their hushed conversations hinting at growing gossip throughout the county. Later that afternoon, Lara sat with her daughters in the nursery, she overheard two maids speaking in low voices about Lord Percival. He had been seen riding between the great houses, speaking privately with other nobles, his face grave with apparent concern for his cousin's reputation. As dusk approached, a messenger arrived at the manor, rain-splattered and travel-worn. He carried a sealed letter bearing Lord Percival's crest. Kevin broke the seal in his study, his jaw tightening as he read the carefully worded threats within. The letter spoke of noble houses withdrawing their support, of alliances crumbling, of the scandal threatening the very foundation of Kevin's influence. Percival wrote with false concern of how easily the situation could be resolved if only Kevin would send Lara and her children away. Kevin stood before the fireplace, the letter crushed in his hand. Without hesitation, he cast the paper into the flames, watching as Percival's schemes turned to ash. The fire cast shadows across his face, highlighting the determination in his eyes as he watched the letter burn. Its destruction a silent act of defiance against those who would try to control him. Through fear of scandal, the great hearth crackled with warmth as evening settled over the manor. Shadows danced across the oak-paneled walls, while Kevin and Lara sat in companionable silence, watching the twins sleep peacefully in their shared cradle. The smaller babe clutched a tiny blanket, while her sister's thumb found its way to her mouth. Kevin's gaze shifted from the sleeping infants to Lara's face, softened by firelight. "These past weeks," he began quietly, "have brought changes I never expected." Lara looked up, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "Your Grace has shown such kindness, Kevin," he corrected gently. "Please, when we are alone like this, call me Kevin." She blushed, dropping her eyes. "Kevin," she whispered, testing the intimacy of his name. "Before you came," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "this house was merely stone and timber. Empty rooms filled with memories of loss." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My late wife, when she died in childbed, I thought my heart died with her." Lara's breath caught as Kevin rose from his chair, moving to kneel beside her. "But you and your daughters, you've brought life back to these halls, back to my heart." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for hers. "I find myself smiling again, Lara, laughing, hoping." Tears welled in Lara's eyes as their fingers intertwined. The firelight seemed to embrace them, creating a peaceful cocoon of warmth and possibility. For one precious moment, the world beyond. The hearth ceased to exist. Then came the sharp rap of boots on stone, and the drawing room door burst open. Lord Percival strode in, his traveling cloak still damp from evening mist. His face bore the satisfied smile of a man delivering unwelcome news. "Cousin," he announced, barely acknowledging Lara's presence. "I bring word from the parish court." Kevin rose slowly, positioning himself between Percival and Lara. "What word?" "Her husband," Percival gestured dismissively toward Lara, "has filed a formal petition. He claims his legal rights to the twins as his heirs." His smile grew colder. Despite his earlier emotional outburst, the law stands firmly on his side. Lara's hand flew to her throat, a small cry escaping her lips. The twins stirred in their cradle, sensing their mother's distress. "Impossible," Kevin growled. That brute publicly disowned them. The entire village witnessed his cruelty. Percival shrugged elegantly. Words spoken in anger hold no legal weight against a father's rights. "Surely you understand this, cousin. The law must be respected, even by a duke. I will fight this." Kevin's voice carried the weight of his authority. "I have declared myself their protector, and I will not abandon them now." "The village already divides itself," Percival continued, clearly relishing each word. "Some support your unusual dedication. To these commoners, others believe tradition must be upheld, that a duke has no business interfering in such matters." Kevin's hands clenched into fists. "Then let them judge me." I care not for their gossip when innocent lives hang in the balance. But Lara had gone very still, her face pale in the firelight. The weight of reality crushed the tender hope that had bloomed moments before. She watched as Kevin and Percival argued, seeing how this conflict threatened everything Kevin had built: his authority, his reputation, the respect of his peers. After Percival finally departed, Kevin tried to reassure her. "We will find a way," he promised. "I have influence in the courts, resources to fight this battle." Lara nodded mutely, but her heart had already begun to crack. She excused herself soon after, claiming fatigue, though sleep was far from her. In the nursery, long after the house had grown quiet, Lara stood at the window. Moonlight silvered the rolling fields beyond the manor grounds, peaceful and indifferent to human struggles. Her twins slept soundly, unaware of the storm gathering. Around them, she pressed her hand against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the pain. Kevin's words of love still echoed in her ears, making this moment all the more painful. How could she stay, knowing her presence might destroy the honor of the man who had saved her? How could she bear to watch his standing crumble, his influence wane, all because he had shown kindness to a common woman and her children? As midnight passed, marked by the distant tolling of the church bell, Lara reached her decision. Though it would break her heart, she must leave, disappear into the night, before she could bring any more harm to the Duke, who had risked everything to protect her. The manor lay hushed in pre-dawn stillness, only faint candlelight flickering through a few windows. In her chamber, Lara moved like a shadow, her heart pounding with each tiny sound. She had dressed quickly in her old clothes, leaving behind the finer garments provided during her stay. With trembling hands, she wrapped her precious twins in warm blankets, fighting back tears as one cooed softly in her sleep. "Hush, my loves," she whispered, pressing gentle kisses to their foreheads. "We must be quiet now." The nursery door creaked slightly as she eased it open. Lara froze, listening intently, but the corridor remained silent. Her footsteps whispered against the carpeted halls as she made her way down the servants' stairs. The twins cradled close to her chest. In the courtyard, morning mist clung to the cobblestones. Lara paused beneath an archway, gathering her courage. The parish village lay 3 miles distant, and she would have to walk quickly to reach it before the household fully woke. Her husband would be there, likely drinking at the tavern even. At this early hour, a thought made her shudder, but she steeled herself. Better to surrender now, on her terms, than watch Kevin's reputation crumble. She had barely reached the outer gate when a familiar voice called out softly, "Miss Lara." Martha, one of the kitchen maids who had shown her kindness, emerged from the shadows. "You mustn't go," she pleaded, clutching her shawl. The master he'll be heartbroken. "Please, Martha," Lara begged. "Don't try to stop me. I'm doing this to protect him." But Martha was already turning, her skirt swishing as she hurried back toward the manor. "I can't let you do this, miss. I won't." Lara wanted to call after her, but dared not raise her voice. Instead, she hurried through the gate, her boots sliding slightly on the dew-dampened road. The twins, bless them, remained quiet, lulled by the gentle motion of her walk. The muddy road stretched before her, rutted from cartwheels and recent rain. Mist wrapped around her like a shroud as she pressed on, her arms aching from carrying her precious burden. When she heard hoofbeats in the distance, her heart clenched with both fear and longing. A roadside shrine appeared through the fog. Simple wooden cross with a small roof to shelter travelers' prayers. Lara sank to her knees before it, tears finally breaking free. "Please, God," she whispered, "give me strength to do what must be done. Protect these innocent ones and help him understand why I had to go." The hoofbeats grew closer. She knew without turning that it was Kevin. She could feel his presence even before his horse's heavy breathing broke through the mist. The twins stirred, as if sensing their protector's arrival. "Lara." His voice was rough with emotion as he dismounted. "By all that's holy, what are you doing?" She couldn't look at him, keeping her eyes fixed on the shrine. "I must go. Your reputation, your standing eye, cannot be the cause of their destruction." "Look at me," he commanded, then softened his tone. "Please." Slowly, she raised her tear-stained face. Kevin knelt in the mud beside her, heedless of his fine clothes. His eyes held such tenderness it made her heart ache. "You are not destroying anything," he said firmly. "You are building something new, something precious. These past weeks have. Show me what truly matters." He reached out to touch one of the twins' cheeks. "Let me fight for you, for all of you. But your position, the other nobles, mean nothing compared to the joy you've brought back into my life." He took her hands in his. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself to that brute. I swear it." A sob caught in Lara's throat as Kevin gently lifted her to her feet. With infinite care, he helped her mount his horse, ensuring she and the twins were secure before swinging up behind them. His arms encircled them protectively as he took the reins. Dawn was breaking as they turned back toward the manor, painting the mist with golden light. Kevin's face was set with determination, his jaw clenched against whatever battles lay ahead. Lara leaned back against his chest, her tears drying in the morning breeze. As the twins slumbered peacefully in their shared blanket, the parish church stood solemn against the morning sky as villagers filed in for Sunday service. Inside, ancient traditions ruled, peasants crowded the back pews while gentry claimed the front. And Duke Kevin of Wexford sat alone in his elevated noble seat. Lara settled quietly in the last row. The twins sleeping peacefully in their swaddling clothes. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across worn stone floors as the congregation waited for service to begin.
It's the familiar
Scent of beeswax candles and incense filled the air. But today's usual peace was broken by the sharp sound of boots on stone. Lord Percival strode in, Lara's husband stumbling beside him. Though early in the day, the husband's face already showed signs of drink. Percival's voice cut through the reverent silence. "Father, before you begin the service, we demand justice." His words echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "This man's legal. Rights to his heirs cannot be denied, even by a duke." The priest hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched his prayer book. But before he could speak, Kevin rose from his ducal pew, his tall figure commanding attention. "You speak of rights." Kevin's voice rang clear and strong. "But what of responsibilities? What of the divine duty to protect those in our care?" He turned to face the congregation. "True nobility lies not in titles or land, but in the courage to cherish those who need our protection. I have seen this man cast aside his own blood, raise his hand against an innocent mother." Murmurs rippled through the church. From the back pews, Mary the baker's wife stood up. "It's true, Father. I've seen him stumbling drunk, raging through the village many a night." Her voice shook, but held firm. Another woman rose. "He's thrown my Thomas against a wall for crossing his path," Sarah the weaver added. "The man's got nothing but cruelty in his heart." One by one, villagers stood to speak. Tales of drunken violence, of threats against children, of cruel words and crueler deeds filled the sacred space. Lara's husband grew red-faced with rage. But Percival's restraining hand kept him from lunging forward. The priest raised his hands for silence. His earlier timidity replaced by resolution. "I have heard enough," he declared. "The Church cannot condone such actions. By the power vested in me, I grant annulment on grounds of abandonment and abuse." He made the sign of the cross. The children are free from his claim, as is their mother. Lara's husband lunged forward with a roar, but several villagers moved to block his path. Percival, seeing his scheme crumble, backed away toward the door. The church bells began to toll, their deep voices speaking of justice and mercy. Lara sat, trembling, tears of relief streaming down her face. Then she felt a warm hand take hers. Kevin stood beside her pew, his fingers entwining with hers before all gathered witnesses. Through her tears, she saw the congregation's faces, nobles and peasants alike, turn toward them. In that moment, as the bells rang out across the village, old barriers began to crumble like autumn leaves in the wind. The spring sunlight streamed through the parish windows, casting rainbow patterns across Lara's simple, cream-colored gown. After 3 weeks of banns being read, the day had finally arrived. She stood before the altar beside Kevin, her heart full to bursting. Behind them, the housekeeper, Mrs. Everly, cradled the twins, who cooed and reached their tiny hands toward. The flickering candles. Dearly beloved, the priest began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church. The same priest who had once hesitated now spoke with conviction, joining their hands with sacred purpose. Kevin's fingers were warm and steady against Lara's trembling ones. "I, Kevin, Duke of Wexford, take thee." Lara, his voice rang with quiet dignity as he spoke the ancient vows. When Lara repeated her own promises, her voice grew stronger with each word, transforming from the frightened woman of months past into a duchess worthy of her new station as Kevin slipped the golden ring onto her finger. Mrs. Everly dabbed at her eyes with her free hand, careful not to disturb the twins. The congregation watched in reverent silence as two souls, once divided by birth, were united before God. The celebration that followed at the manor exceeded all expectations. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, and sweet pastries. Servants and villagers mingled freely in the great hall, raising glasses to their new duchess. The same household that had once whispered scandal behind closed doors now sang Lara's praises openly. "She's got a gentle heart. Our new duchess," the cook declared, passing out honey cakes to eager children. "And didn't I always say so?" Even the most resistant servants had been won over by Lara's quiet dignity and Kevin's obvious devotion. The twins, passed carefully from arms to arms, became everyone's treasures, their laughter echoing through halls that had known too much silence. In a shadowed corner, Lord Percival watched the festivities, his face twisted with bitter disappointment. Without a word, he slipped away from the celebration, his schemes for influence crumbling like autumn leaves. Few noticed his departure, and fewer still cared as twilight painted the sky in soft purples and golds. Kevin led Lara into the manor gardens. The twins, now steady enough to toddle, gripped their parents' hands as they walked among the blooming roses. The evening air was sweet with the scent of spring flowers, and distant music from the great hall floated on the breeze. Kevin paused beside a marble fountain, watching as their daughters reached to touch the sparkling water. He turned to Lara, his eyes soft with emotion. "Now, at last, we are a family," he said quietly, clasping her hand in his. Lara's heart swelled as she gazed at their little group, the twins' delighted giggles, Kevin's tender smile, and the promise of all their tomorrows stretching before them. Here, in this moment, love had truly conquered all, bringing dignity, joy, and the sweetest victory of all, a family bound not by rules of birth, but by the deeper bonds of the heart. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.